Hey guys, it's KJ from The Scariest Movie Ever. I wanted to talk to you today in this video about Space Force and some of the logos around Space Force. Also the connection between Freemasonry and ancient Egypt. We'll also discuss the coming fake alien invasion and what role Space Force may have in that coming event. The Christian priest Origen said that the Egyptian philosophers have sublime notions with regards to the divine nature, which they kept secret and never discovered to the people but under a veil of fables and allegories. Now here we see the similarities to the teaching methods of Freemasonry, which also is performed by way of symbolism and allegory, and of course it's never revealed to the uninitiated. Masonic teaching centers on its initiation rituals. Each of Freemasonry's 3 degrees takes the candidate through a journey steeped in history, symbolism, and allegory to teach him lessons of how to praise his divine spark, or really more to the point, how to become the God-man, or your own God. Occult scholar Lewis Spence tells us the same goal of initiation in ancient Egypt. He says the purpose of initiation is a conventional attempt to realize man's place in the universe and in the divine scheme of things, and for this, I believe the Egyptian mystery system achieved for the first time in an orderly and philosophical manner. Have we no lessons to learn from Egypt? Oh yes, we do. The greatest in the world. The knowledge of that divine introspection which alone can give man the likeness of the divine. There are multiple links between Freemasonry and ancient Egypt. Another link is Freemasonry and... There are many links between ancient Egypt and Freemasonry. Another link they have is Isis, Osiris, the story that formed the crux of the ancient Egyptian belief system. In the Egyptian rites, Horus is the savior avenger, son of Isis, magically conceived through a ritual after the brutal murder of her husband, brother Osiris. We can apply this myth to modern Freemasonry's allegory of the murder of Hiram-Abip, the chief architect of Solomon's temple. Isis made a widow by Osiris's murder. Freemasons are called widows' sons, by the way. And this gives birth through initiation ritual to Horus, the Redeemer, raised solely that we may avenge the destruction of wisdom by Set, aka Chaos or the Devil, and restore peace, harmony, and the just God, in whom there is no death. Again, there are many similarities between Freemasonry and the Egyptian mystery schools. And speaking of that, let's take a look at some of the symbolism around Space Force associated with ancient Egypt. Right here I slowed down a part of the video. I'm going to show you how they slide in beast system symbolism just in this official video here from Space Force. And it's the most common symbol which is associated with ancient Egypt. It's the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. And here's our pyramid, and just a few seconds later, your all-seeing eye. So once again, your association with the beast system. It's one of the most common symbols we see on everything. Here's another sequence you need to pay attention to. Look at the screen right here in the background. There's something you need to see here. We'll take a closer look. It's important to understand that this sequence during that video only lasted a few seconds. It was pretty quick. I had it slowed down. But as you can see right here, just in the few seconds that we had during this sequence, we have a countdown taking place right over here. And in that few seconds, they made sure that we got our 311. Now 311 is our 33. That's our connection to Freemasonry, of course, once again, and the mystery schools as well. 33 is a magic number. The occultists, the Luciferians use this in everything. We see it all the time in movies, TV shows, news stories, corporate logos. It's everywhere. It's also used by them as a mockery for the death of Christ at the age of 33. So we got the 33, once again, we find everywhere in this beast system associated with that backbone, Freemasonry. But what's this? We see something else right here. What's this image, these images right over here? We also had a few seconds of these images, and these images were actually active. They were lighting up. The one on the right was moving. And what do we have here? Take a look. We have a false god from ancient Egypt, one of the false gods, a chimera. Looks like it's a mixture of things, yeah? You get your chimera, you get your false god from ancient Egypt, from the mystery schools. And we take a look on the right, and what we have over here, we have another one of those false gods. He's kind of upside down right there, but it looks like he's coming out of what I believe is CERN, the LHC. Significant symbolic for the abyss. So on this left side, we have one of the ancient false gods of Egypt. Over here on the right, we have another one which appears to be coming out of the abyss, coming out of LHC, coming out of CERN. And we know CERN just fired up again over the last several weeks. And of course, the chaos in our world right now is increasing. And it has been. Everything's being turned upside down. We're literally in the shadow of tribulation. We're waiting on the Antichrist to make his full-on appearance. And I believe his spirit is very active right now behind the scenes. And I see that everywhere. U.S. Space Force establishes new unit to track threats in orbit. Of course. The unit's mission is to outwit, outreach, and win in the space domain. But take a look at the symbolism right here, and it doesn't get much more obvious. You've got a pharaoh, a false god on top of the planet, just underneath the 8-pointed star of Lucifer. Let's take a closer look. The Antichrist ruling the world. The pharaoh on top of the planet, the pharaoh being a symbol for the Antichrist, underneath the 8-pointed star of Lucifer. It's perfect for the times we're in. And this is from Space Force. This is official. But it's, again, right in front of our face, but so few people really understand the implications. This is the beast system. And here's another example of the symbolism surrounding Space Force. Now, this was discovered by a friend of ours, Jacob Israel. He recently was talking about this, so I wanted to show you this as well. I looked it up, and this really is one of the official Space Force hats that are out there. They're even selling these. But as we find in this beast system, sometimes to get to the truth, you have to flip things upside down. Because everything's being flipped upside down right now in our reality as it is. But they work in secret. They work in shadows. It's the occult. It's hidden in front of your face, but you can't see it. This is one of the ways that we can see what they're doing, what they're showing each other, what they're showing us, the real spirit behind whatever it is. Let's take a look at this hat flipped upside down. Right there it is. It really doesn't get much more obvious. You see the Baphomet, a representation of the devil himself. The shuttle, it's supposed to be a shuttle, that's actually the face. You see the eyes, you see the mouth, and out of the top of the head you see the horns. And just like the Baphomet, the representation we see, the imagery of Baphomet, you get the pentagram right above his head, perfectly placed. And right there it is. That's what we need to understand about Space Force, because that's the spirit that's behind it. And Space Force is going to be used here very soon, I believe, with this fake alien invasion, which is not going to be aliens from another planet. They're beings, evil entities, demons, fallen angels, for one of the greatest deceptions this planet is ever going to see. Did you know that there's a connection between the green movement taking place on the planet right now that we're being forced into and the so-called aliens? There is a connection there. It's very interesting. So I want to take a look here at a few of these clips. In this first one right here, this man used to be the Minister of Defense in Canada. For many years, he's been coming out in public and talking about the aliens. Now listen to what he says here. It comes more near the end of this clip, but he'll show you that association. This is one example, that association between the so-called aliens, which are demons and fallen angels, and the green movement that's being forced on this entire planet right now as part of the final beast system, of course. A complete and total control grid.
Do all of the alien species kind of work together, or is there warring species that war with each other?
Well, I only know about the Galactic Federation, and I don't know much about it, so I shouldn't talk about it. But they are concerned about what's going on in the world, and they have been working through individuals. They'll pick out a few individuals and visit them or talk to them telepathically or send information to them by channeling. I have a very close friend who is writing his second book right now with channeling from a species called the Basidas. Very few people have heard of it. They have a deal that they won't interfere. But I think that there's also a loophole if things get bad enough that they would make exceptions. But we can't count on them. I mean, maybe we can count on them, but we shouldn't count on them because they say, you clean up your act. You're in charge. It's your planet. And if it comes to a dead end, it will be because you let it or made it a dead end. Because it wasn't necessary and you had everything going. It's one of the best planets in the whole universe. And everybody covets the fact that it's so good, and you have been destroying it. And this is something that we've tried to let you know by various ways over a long period. The individual communications always say, look, there are things you've got to do. Stop your clear cutting, stop your fracking, stop using fossil fuels, because there are better ways.
What you're about to see here are a few clips from what I believe is one of the most important interviews that's ever been done, ever conducted, specifically relating to the days we're in right now. This man's name is Joseph Spencer. He recorded this interview in 1989. He was dying, and he actually died the following year in 1990. It's the only time he's ever talked about this on camera. It's about 14 minutes long, and I'll just show you a few clips. But he's ex-CIA, and more importantly, he claims to be ex-Men in Black. And just check out what he's saying here. He actually gives a few dates, and he missed the coronavirus outbreak by only a couple of years. Remember, this was recorded in 1989. He also gives a date for the coming fake alien invasion, and that's only a few years off as well, so we'll see how close he is to that. But once again, we'll see that connection between everything playing out in the world right now and the current beast system as it stands, and what the so-called aliens want, their agenda.
This transition in my life happened in 1970. The senior black project director was William T. Latham, who had worked under CIA Executive Director Richard Schlesinger. Latham stated that I was the perfect candidate for my new position. I was a foster child, and I had no connections to existing relatives. I had no friends or social life. It was easy for them to erase my past and provide me with a new identity. I gave myself to them as a priest would to his God. But first, my mind had to be erased. I was injected with various forms of mind-altering drugs, LSD, heroin, mescaline, morphine, sodium pentothal, and more. Drug-induced hypnosis followed with antegrade and retrograde amnesia. The goal was to program me to do two things: kill and forget. After 9 months of programming, I had become a man in black. What I later discovered was that not all the men in black were human. About a third were alien hybrids. Their distinctive feature was the absence of whites in their eyes, giving the impression of empty eye sockets. This unsettled me, and it took months to adjust to the reality of alien integration. My assignments largely dealt with UFO sightings and crash sites. In August of 1971, I witnessed my first UFO crash site just north of Edwards Air Force Base in California. Inside the craft were 3 grayed humanoids, 2 dead, 1 still alive. Also in the craft was a human female abductee. The alien humanoids were transported to the base, but 2 witnesses had arrived before us and took several photographs. The first surrendered his camera, but the second fled. When we apprehended him, he resisted, and I was ordered to silence him, which I did. The killing of witnesses was executed with a wand that acted very much like today's taser, but the voltage from the wand would cause immediate cardiac arrest, and the victim's death would be attributed to natural causes. We silenced countless victims, not only men, but women of all ages and even teenagers. The following day, after each kill, our memories were reset, so we would have no recollection of the murders. A good majority of the victims were ufologists and whistleblowers. Among the ufologists I personally silenced were Paul William Cooper, Milton Vigay, Claude Monroe, Anthony Vargas, and noted documentarian Samantha Willis. When my wand malfunctioned with Samantha, I resorted to strangulation. She fought for her life for almost 2 minutes. In recalling this act, I stared into her pleading eyes for the entire duration with absolutely no remorse, guilt, or feelings. That was how effective the mind conditioning was. And it's her face that haunts my dreams more than anyone's to this day.
So they stuffed out a documentarian.
Yep.
Well, that's not good to hear.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on. In 1954, Dwight Eisenhower signed what's known as the Granada Treaty with the alien gray race. In exchange for shared alien technologies, the Greys were allowed to abduct a number of humans annually for medical examination. The Greys also demanded anonymity from the public. A short time later, human technology took a giant leap forward with circuit chips, fiber optics, and lasers. The Granada Treaty is still active today, but the number of human abductions has increased, despite objections from the world governments. Now, the really interesting part. Every year, at least 8 million children go missing in the world. I can attest that 1/3 of them are abducted by government operatives and transported to any one of the 1,477 underground military installations on the planet, then imprisoned for the remainder of their lives. The children are subjected to biological and genetic experiments, dissections, and mutilations performed not by human scientists, but an alien gray species. During my stay at the Vanguard Underground Base north of Phoenix, Arizona, I witnessed many of these procedures. Because there was no form of anesthesia administered to the young patients, the halls reverberated with the screams of tortured children from morning to night. The ones that perished were incinerated in the installation's crematoriums. My point of contact at this base was Lieutenant Colonel Charles T. Leninger, and he was a human-alien hybrid. And get ready for this. In 1994, the World Population Summit in Cairo, Egypt, had 160 nations participate, where they all agreed that the human population was out of control and must be stopped because the world is running out of resources. An agreement was formed that would mandate the reduction of humans from 6 billion to 800 million by the year 2030. This meant finding a method or methods to wipe out nearly 95% of the population. Solutions were discovered, investigated, tested, then created, and have been in full force since. The procedures have been inflicted onto the human race are as follows. 1. Toxic levels of chemically enhanced fluoride have been secretly added to our drinking water over the last 20 years in every city and community on the planet. I personally oversaw the delivery of fluoride barrels to Denver, Chicago, Tampa, and Minneapolis water departments. The adverse effects of fluoride poisoning to the human body are numerous and debilitating. The effects to children is damage to their neurological development, among other serious ailments. 2. Man-made viruses and diseases. The AIDS virus, which was a designer byproduct of the American Disease Institute, was distributed through vaccines to the public in 1980. Instituted as a preliminary population control tactic, the results were successful and led to more lab-produced viruses that have since been unleashed onto the public. Among those is the development of a mutated version of the common flu to replicate the 1918 influenza pandemic that killed 40 million people. The first strain of this new flu virus will be released to the public in late 2017. So if we see a flu outbreak in the late 2017 or early 2018 that's killing people, we'll know this is true.
Right.
3, killing us from the air with neurotoxins, barium chloride, cancer microbes, and viruses by way of chemtrails, released into the skies daily over all inhabited regions by military aircrafts. The effects of these toxins are severe and over time lethal, causing respiratory ailments, cancer, damage to the immune systems, and sterilization in men. Since the chemtrail plan was implemented, sperm count in men has dropped nearly 50%. If this isn't reversed soon, the human race will face early extinction. Now the grand finale. This is some scary shit. In March 1997, an event known as the Phoenix Lights became the most infamous UFO sighting in history. A mile-wide vessel, clearly not man-made, flew slowly and silently over the state of Arizona and was witnessed by 10,000 people, including the governor of Arizona. To date, there has been no reasonable explanation. But for every witness interviewed, the craft was as real as anything they'd ever seen. Their lives were transformed. They now believe that we truly are not alone. However, there is another truth, for I know what they really saw. In 1986, while stationed at an underground installation near Boulder, Colorado, I was introduced to Project Skybeam by Lieutenant General Andrew Garris. I was then led down a corridor and into a large hangar, where a stealth bomber hovered only 20 feet above me. I stood there confused. Then Garris looked over at me and smiled, then asked if I was certain of what I was seeing. I replied, of course. What else could it be? I was then shocked to find out that this wasn't a real craft. It was a projected hologram. Since the early 1950s, scientists have been developing holographic technology, and over the years improved it to a state that we can only imagine. As I stood there staring at the bomber, which looked so absolutely real and solid that I could reach up and touch it, I contemplated the possibilities. What if this projection was 1,000 feet up in the sky? How would anyone know that that was an illusion? The Phoenix Lights craft, witnessed by 10,000 people, was the first grand-scale skybeam test upon the public. It succeeded beyond expectations. In October 1938, Orson Welles unleashed his War of the Worlds radio broadcast to the American public. It was so realistically portrayed, vast portions of the population went into panic. Terrified citizens scrambled to evacuate their cities in droves. America had been easily tricked by very simple means. To amplify this response, those who are truly in power of not only our country, but all the countries on the planet, and who are the true purveyors of the depopulation process, have formulated the final stage of their sinister plan. In the year 2024, a global event will alter the course of mankind's future. The world will stand witness to a massive alien invasion. Thousands of projected holographic alien warships will blanket the skies, sending people into a global panic. Real military crafts within the holograms will inflict actual damage to the surrounding areas to sell the gimmick. And as a result of the ensuing human chaos, a one-world government will immediately form without any resistance from the people. They will be the new world order. Once this happens, we as a people will be doomed to enslavement and accelerated depopulation. With that said, the only hope for human salvation is to acquire and spread the knowledge of these activities and agendas. Resist, retaliate, then conquer this imposing enemy. The time is now, as humanity is rapidly approaching its final days.
On the evening of October 25th, 1973, a young Pennsylvania farmer, Stephen Pulaski, and at least 15 other witnesses saw a bright object hovering over a field near them. Stephen grabbed his rifle and went to investigate. It was anything has come from the study of UFOs, and that the least likely explanation of UFOs is the hypothesis of extraterrestrial visitations by intelligent beings. On the evening of October 25th, 1973, a young Pennsylvania farmer, Stephen Pulaski, and at least 15 other witnesses saw a bright object hovering over a field near them. Stephen grabbed his rifle and went to investigate. It was then that he noticed something walking along by the fence. They were hairy and long-armed, with greenish-yellow eyes, and a smell like burning rubber was present. Stephen sensed that these creatures were not friendly and fired a tracer bullet over their heads. And when they kept on coming, he fired directly at one of them. The creatures then all disappeared into the woods, and the glowing object disappeared from the field instantaneously. UFO researchers as well as a state trooper were called in to investigate. When they arrived, the people there told them that Stephen had been growling like an animal and flailing his arms. His own dog ran toward him, and Stephen attacked the dog. Stephen then collapsed, and after a time began to come to his senses. The entire group commented on the nauseating, sulfur-like odor that was present. One of the earliest references to a spacecraft is probably that found in an ancient Egyptian account, some 1,500 years before Christ. One of the characteristics of that craft was the foul odor that emitted from it. The Amityville Horror was based on a factual account of what happened to a family in Amityville, New York. An irritating and nauseating odor seemed to accompany the presence of the ghost or spirit entity that entered there from time to time. Whitley Strieber wrote of his abduction experiences in his book, Communion. He said he could smell their presence and that it smelled like sulfur. On October 11th, 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing when a strange craft descended and hovered near them. Parker passed out, and Hickson was paralyzed, but was able to continue observing what was happening. Two entities then emerged from the craft and picked Hickson up by his arms and carried him inside the ship, where he was thoroughly examined. He was then taken back to where they had been fishing on the riverbank. When the two fishermen went to the sheriff's office to report their story, they were interrogated and then left alone in a room with a hidden microphone. The recording of their conversation revealed that both men were quite frightened by their experience. The emotional trauma had been so great to Parker that after Hickson left the room, he began to pray. Ultimately, he suffered a nervous breakdown as a result of his experience. In the spring of 1959, UFOs brought panic to Soviet radar and Air Force personnel by hovering and circling for more than 24 hours above Sverdlovsk, headquarters of a tactical missile command. Red fighter pilots were ordered airborne to chase the UFOs away, but later reported that the alien objects easily outmaneuvered their jets and zigzagged to avoid their machine gun fire. The Russian spacecraft Salyut-6 returned to Earth in 1978 after 96 days in orbit. They told of a formation of UFOs.
Sightings have been reported by James Lovell, James McDivitt, Wally Schirra, Deke Slayton, Gordon Cooper, and...
This document was compiled for the United States Air Force and is now in the Library of Congress. Dr. Jacques Vallée has addressed the United Nations on UFOs and was the model for Lacombe in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He is the author of 8 books on UFOs and has been widely recognized as the premier investigating scientist in the realm of UFO research. In his book, Messengers of Deception, Vallée says, an impressive parallel can be made between UFO occupants and the popular conception of demons. And in his book, Confrontations, he writes, the medical examinations to which abductees are said to be subjected, often accompanied by sadistic sexual manipulation, is reminiscent of the medieval tales of encounters with demons. He also made this statement, I believe that when we speak of UFO sightings as instances of space visitations, we are looking at the phenomenon on the wrong level. We are not dealing with successive waves of visitations from space. We are dealing with a control system. And he states, UFOs are the means through which man's concepts are being rearranged. They are engaging in a worldwide enterprise of subliminal seduction.
Jacques Vallée, at least at that time when he wrote that book, was an agnostic. Interestingly, he comes to basically the same conclusions I do as a Christian from my research. And he said about UFOs, they're real, but they're not physical. They're messengers of deception. And this was based on his research of about 20 years. They seem to be psychologically preparing, setting us up for some ultimate delusion that is too horrible even to imagine as yet. I would agree with that.